14.3. These are the targets that I've set for my client and myself. The specific session aims are the targets I want me and my client to achieve within the session. However, the program aims are only specific for my client. This is the risk assessment I made before the session took place. These are the results from the health test that client 1 did. However, the target heart rate zone, so 60 to 70% of his maximum heart rate, so 147 beats per minute. That's what I want my client to achieve during the session. So before the warm-up took place, I just did an overview of what my client would be doing in the session and what that would involve. And also I asked him PARQ questions to make sure that he was okay to take part in the activities. So the warm-up I chose my client to do before the main session of rowing is he had to jog the first third of a netball court with a football, sprint the second third without the football, and then finally jog the last third with the football. He repeated that 3 times and then we reversed it. So he sprinted the first third, jogged the second, and then sprinted the last third, and only had control over the football when he was jogging. Next, he did some dynamic stretches. So first of all, we started with his hamstrings. So we did the exercise where you lift your foot slightly towards like your shin, and then sweep with your hands to try and like touch the floor, and that created a stretch down his hamstring. So he did that 5 times on each leg while walking to a third line. And then on the way back, he did some lunges, so 5 on each leg again. Next, he did some shoulder stretches. So while walking, he was on his tiptoes and reached straight up. So interlocking his fingers and then creating the stretch down the shoulders. Then also while walking, he did arm stretches as well. So this involved pulling his arm across his chest and then creating that stretch in his arm, and then also lifting his arm behind his head and then pulling on his elbow, which also created the stretch in his arm. He repeated these exercises 5 times on each arm. The reason why I chose this warm-up was to prepare my client for exercise. The jog and then sprinting activity elevated his heart rate so that more oxygenated blood was in his body to begin with, to prepare his muscles for the main session. But also because he was sprinting and jogging, he used his anaerobic glycolysis energy system before the main session, which was good because he would have already transitioned between the energy systems, which means that he would be using his aerobic glycolysis energy system during the aerobic work, which should aid his training because oxygen is already present and therefore lactic acid won't build up. I incorporated a football element to the warm-up so that my client doesn't get bored of just jogging, due to there being a sporting element within it. So the warm-up becomes more interesting for him as he is interested in football. The dynamic stretches I did with my client prepared his legs and arms for the main session of rowing. So it made his muscles, tendons and ligaments more pliable in both his shoulders, arms, and hamstrings and quadriceps, so that he doesn't get injured while on the rowing machine, as these muscles are primarily used in rowing. Because his muscles are fully stretched, then this aids training as he's not restricted by the lack of movement from his ligaments, tendons and muscles. For the main session, I decided to do a 15-minute rowing session at 60 to 70% of my client's maximum heart rate, and at a rate of 3 per 500 metres. The reason why I chose to do rowing as the main session is because overall my client wants to improve his aerobic capacity. And I thought this would be a perfect way to ease him into the exercise before completing the 6-week training program. And also, it gave him a chance to practice his technique of rowing so that during the 6-week training program, he could gain the full benefits from this method of training. And also, practicing the technique meant that during the middle of the training sessions in the 6-week program, my client didn't cause himself an injury due to incorrect technique. However, going back to my client's targets, his main target was to improve his aerobic capacity. So this is probably the main reason why I chose rowing, as he can work aerobically to improve this component. For the cool down, my client did skipping for 3 minutes, and then we did some static stretches after that. The reason why this was my cool down is because the skipping allows all areas of my client's body to keep moving that he'd been working on during the main session of rowing, therefore keeping the heart rate elevated so that more oxygenated blood is travelling to the working muscles. Then this improved the rate at which carbon dioxide diffused and then aids the recovery process because the oxygen helps remove the waste product of carbon dioxide to reduce the effect of DOMS. So that's why I chose skipping as part of my cool down. Next, my client did some static stretches. This is because not only does it increase the flexibility of the muscles, ligaments and tendons, it also helps reduce the injury risk next time my client will complete physical activity and allows the muscles, ligaments and tendons to cool down properly so that they don't become stiff or tight. So the areas of the body we focused the static stretches on were the legs and the arms. This is because during the main session of rowing, these are the areas of the body my client used. So firstly, my client did a hamstring stretch on the floor. So he sat down on the floor and put his legs out straight and tried to touch his toes. He held that stretch for 8 seconds. He repeated this 3 times. And then next we did a quadriceps stretch. So he leant against a wall and lifted his leg up so that there was flexion at the knee, and then held that stretch for 8 seconds and then repeated that 3 times. Next, he did an arm stretch against the wall where he put his palm against the wall and leant his body slightly forward. This created the stretch in his arm, and he did this on both arms 5 times and held the stretch for 8 seconds. As you can see in the photo, he also did an arm stretch where you pull your arm across your chest, and he held that for 8 seconds as well, and he did 5 reps on each arm. After the session was completed, I asked my client if he felt properly cooled down and whether he felt well after the session. Also, I checked his heart rate to see if he had reached the target heart rate, and also I asked him questions about the coaching points, which I will explain in more detail later in the presentation.